Hey folks, Steve here with another Fatal Alliances video. This is going to be the second part to our Advanced Warfare mini-series looking at the mechanics and gameplay of later units that come into the game of Fatal Alliances once the game reaches 1915, 16, 17, 18, and so on. Last video we were able to show an example of strategic bombardment here in some attacks on Britain and the United Kingdom with some very, very minor air combat to accompany that. And now we're going to move on to kind of the rest of our manufactured turn here as the Central Powers, as Germany on the Western Front, as we go through the motions here. And again, looking at sort of a sequence of play, we had finished strategic bombardment, and so now, as I go through to demonstrate this, we are going to be looking at doing ground strike missions. Then there's rail movement, land combat, and so on. And really what we're going to be looking at is some more advanced air combat, so air combat involving multiple air units of both fighters and bombers in a single combat, and then also the use of these other units here that we haven't gotten a chance to really see, like the mechanized divisions. And what I may even need to do is switch gears and have the Allies perform some attacks with their armored divisions. But we'll see. Again, this is going to be kind of loose. This is a manufactured scenario or situation that I created with just making sure all the units were here and enough counters that we could get some demonstrations going. So looking into ground striking, if you watched my previous videos, ground striking was something that we did pretty often, and we mostly did it with the power of artillery units. Now, in the past, when we were doing those artillery ground strikes, it was as simple as, stating where we're going to target for the ground strike, and then rolling the die and hoping for the number in the gray circle there, as you can see for that example artillery unit. That number or less is going to flip the units, or flip a unit in the hex that you're bombarding, and you would roll for each unit in the hex for the bombardment. Now, artillery is pretty plentiful in this game, as they're all division units, and if you've got enough and have concentrated them enough, you can be doing a lot of these bombardments. Now, this later game situation, doing bombardments, ground striking with artillery is still doable, but there's a little bit of a challenge in place, which is, you can see, I'm going to slide this here, that many units are turned 90 degrees for the French's sake here to the right. The Germans also have some turned 90 degrees to the left. The direction doesn't necessarily matter too much, but that is indicating that these units are entrenched. I talked to in the last video a little bit about what that is. You've got to build it. It's part of a gearing limit, but it allows you to provide negatives to the die roll if someone attacks that hex where you have the entrenched units. And so, looking at this, one of the other benefits to entrenching is that it's going to have the ground striking factors of both the artillery units that would be ground striking, plus any bombers that are attempting to do tactical bombing. Now, granted, in this game, the tactical factors of our planes are all going to be very, very low. For the most part, there's a couple that have values of 2 for tactical bombing. That's the lower left. So we're typically not going to see a whole lot of planes being very effective tactical bombers in a World War I game of World in Flames like this. But in order for us to really have a better chance at ground striking these units, when we go to do our ground strike phase, we're going to have to use what the rules refer to as a spotter. So spotters are any plane except for FTR's fighters, and they are treated as bombers until they're cleared in that phase. And once all units are cleared, one of your bombers that were cleared can be a spotter rather than a ground striking bomber. And the thing is, even if you want your artillery to be accurate and get their full value for the ground strike roll, you still need a spotter. So there's still going to need to be air combat here in the later phases of the game. And so really what we may be looking at doing is, as we decide where we're going to do ground strikes, we're going to want to make sure we designate at least one of our bombers as a, we would pre-plan and figure one of the bombers involved in combat is going to be a spotter rather than just a bomber, because again, not going to be super valuable to roll, a 1 on a d10 or a 2 on a d10 hoping to get bombardment or ground strike successes. We want to be using stuff more like, where was that? Excellent artillery. This artillery here, for instance. So if I look around our front line as the Germans, I will see that really the only one that I've lined up that's going to be, oh no, I got 2 here, so 1 here and 1 here, are decently strong artillery units that have a pretty reasonable chance of flipping the units, and they're both as part of a 3 hex versus 1 hex sort of attack pattern here, which is going to be kind of what we want to be looking at. And everywhere else, I have these units here, the artillery with the pink circle. Those are anti-tank artillery, and they're really there to deter the Allied armor that is out there. So that's sort of the rub of why they're there and why we're not really going to bother. There's no point in using them for any sort of ground striking. Because again, when you do a ground strike, obviously planes are going to flip when they've been used for an air mission like that, but your artillery flip when they're done ground striking. So that's all we'll worry about. So if we look in the rules, and I'll just, if you want to follow along as we go, I'll be referencing the rule sections that we're looking at. You want to be in rules, rule 11.7, and that's going to be the ground strike and artillery spotting. And again, just like we did in the last video for strategic bombardment, the opponent, the defending player in this case, the Allies, are going to look to fly combat air patrol to potential target hexes. Now, the trouble with this is, I'm playing myself, so I sort of know what's going to happen, but your opponent isn't going to. What's the plan here? Right now, if I'm using intuition as an Allied player, I might say, well, I know where these artilleries are and where they're going to hit. So right here and here are obvious places to perform cap. But they could conceivably hit other places as ground strikes with their actual tactical bombers that are decent. So we're going to have to be a little careful about where and how we set this up. So if our opponent, if as the Allies, we're going to fly combat air patrol, let's figure out how we want to do that. Well, this fighter and this fighter, the top fighters of these stacks, are going to do cap in the hexes as is. And then what we'll do is... I think what I'm going to want to have done is I'm going to have this unit travel 1, 2, and do cap to this hex, and I'm going to leave this fighter plane down here because we may need him to defend for a ground support later in the turn. So we're going to leave that one here. So we're just going to do one cap to this hex, which makes it a little bit tougher to get after with opposing forces. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And then okay, so we did. I think that's all we're gonna do in terms of that. Oh, I guess we could go up here as well, and so this unit's gonna fly cap to here along with this existing unit. Ooh, and this existing unit. This will be interesting. So we'll just have all three of these guys be here. They're doing cap there, and then these others will remain in reserve here. So I think that's pretty good. And now for the Germans, so they have to designate all artillery and fly our selected attacking bombers and escorting fighters to the target hexes. So this 5-1 artillery will obviously be aiming here. This artillery will be aiming here. And in terms of the planes, let's see. Well, we could try to be sneaky here. Because there was no this is interesting. I'm tempted to, yeah, okay. So this plane is going to go here because there's no cap. So he's flying there. And then we want this unit to fly here with this guy escorting. And this guy's going to go here with this guy escorting and this guy escorting. And I want to see maybe if that's all we're going to do here. And then are we even going to try here? We don't have much to try with. Ah, screw it. We'll have some big combats here. So we'll send. Oh wait, yeah. There's no bomber. Well, do I have a bomber? Maybe it's right here. Sorry. Okay, so yeah, with I'm trying to see if do I have even any other bombers that are kind of worth using right now, and 1, 2, 3, yeah, not really in range. Okay, that's okay. So this is one of those tough decisions you make in the game. You know, the Commonwealth player flew cap with these 3 planes, thinking, you know, hey, he might have sent the bombers and the escort planes, instead of down here, he might have sent them over here. And so, not wanting to lose this hex, the Commonwealth, gave up the resources to send these planes here, with some planes to spare later, potentially, for other roles. So, that's sort of the tough thing with the order of play, where sometimes, the attacker, wherever you're flying cap, they're going to choose to not go, potentially. But now, the opponent's going to fly intercepting fighters to target hexes. So, let's see. Interceptions with half range. So, I'm going to have to see, when it comes to rounding, whether or not this fighter can actually intercept over here. That's really the question that's worth asking, to try to defend those units from the tactical bomber, or the bomber that flew to this hex that didn't have any cap. So, when you intercept, as a reminder from last video, you only get half your printed range. But 3 divided in half is 1.5, which rounds up to 2. So we could go, I believe that this is allowed. This unit can whoops. Oh boy, I didn't mean to take that guy. Put you back. So now that unit is intercepting. And let's see, what are the other places I'd like to intercept? Remember, you got to do it with fighters. So there's a hairball there. But if I use this plane, we're going to be low on fighter planes later in the turn, so we may not want to do that. Those are bombers, so we can't really use that. Well, that's outgunned, so... But we're going to need these fighters for later, too, with these 3 spent. So I think that's the only... That's really the only interception that that makes sense to make here. And as I'm just looking, I don't think, now the Germans, the Central Powers, would once again get to decide, did they want to add any more fighters to the mix? And I think at this point, they do not see a place to really make use of that. So we're going to now fight the air combats. So real quick, we'll start down here. And what we've got is, and I'll just to show where the air combat's taking place. So there's 1 fighter and 1 bomber, and we don't have any accompanying fighters. We're taking a bit of a risk here with these 2 units. So let's see here. So if we look at rules on page 33 of the PDF of the latest rules, or rules section 16.3, we can start looking at the combat value. So again, this one's another simple one. We simply have a French fighter that has a air-to-air strength of 4 against the lead. Because we don't have a German fighter, our air-to-air strength equals the air-to-air rating of the front bomber only. Since there's only 1 bomber, it is just the unit here, and their air-to-air rating is also a 4. Now, you get the air-to-air value for each round for each side by minusing your strength versus the opponent's strength. In this case, the value for the round for both is going to actually be 0. So now we're going to go through the actual resolving of combat. Again, this starts with the inactive side, so the Commonwealth or the Allies, the French, are going to roll 2 dice and then refer to the charts. I've got my charts here off to another screen. And the roll of the dice is a 9. So 9 on 0 is an AC result. So the dice roller chooses any one opposing bomber to clear through the target. It need not be the front bomber. Remove the unit from the lineup and place it on the target. If there are no enemy bombers, ignore the result. So this is unfortunate. This is basically, this unit has gotten to be cleared through to the target, which just, that's pretty much the exact opposite of what the Allies wanted. The die roll for the Central Powers, oh boy, is that another 9? It is another 9. Boy, the last time I rolled combat, it was the exact same. The dice roller, choose anyone opposing. Well, there is no bomber, so ignore the result. So, that simple combat was resolved pretty simply. And now that the combat's over, yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, that's all she wrote. So I think that's the end of that air combat. Okay. So they're gonna flip. They're gonna return to base, and they'll just go down back to base here. And now we've got a ground strike against these 3 units. And again, we're going to roll 1 die for the attack. We're going to roll for each face-up enemy land, fort, or aircraft in the hex. So we just got 3 units. We're going to roll 3 dice. If any of those is equal to or less than the... Oh, actually, come to think of it, this was a bit of a tough... Whoops. As you can see, they are entrenched, so as we roll here, we're going to roll for each unit. Because they're still entrenched, and we didn't have spotting done, because there is no other artillery targeting this hex, this bomber could either have been a spotter or a bomber, but once you're a spotter and there's no other bombers, there's no point to being a spotter, so we're going to go ahead and just try. This is probably a wasted move by the Germans, but demonstration's a demonstration. So for these entrenched units, we're only going to be comparing the die roll against half the aircraft's tactical factors, so 1. So for that first unit, fails. For the second entrenched unit, fails. And then finally, we're going to roll for the artillery, but since the artillery division is a division and not a corps, it can't be entrenched, thus it is not entrenched, and we're going to roll for 1 or a 2, and it fails. So this poor guy is just going to flip, and he's going to return to base, and we'll just send him back here. Nice try, too bad, so sad. That's all she wrote. So let's move to the next combat, which is here. So we've got German fighter, another German fighter, and then the bomber, like so, versus this French fighter and another French fighter. And again, we're just going to tilt these a little bit, and these are entrenched. Whoops. I want to just do the whole stack so I don't lose track of where we're at. So this is the combat. Again, you might want to have, like I said in the last video, some sort of player aid chart for, if you wanted to make it a little more clear, because we're in Vassal and I've got a little bit more room to work with. I'm just using the map because it doesn't doesn't really matter. Okay, so in this one, we now have multiple fighters, which is what that means is going to change essentially how we calculate our combat strength for the round. So, looking at this again, we're going to look at the combat strength is the combat strength of the first fighter in your row, so 8 and 7, and then you're going to add 1 for each other fighter here. So this is 8 plus 1 is 9, and this is 7 plus 1 is 8. Not, 7 plus 7 is 14 or anything else like that. It is simply the front fighter plus 1 for each additional. And the bomber down here has no impact on the combat value since we have fighters here. So we're going to calculate that, and as opposed to some of the combats we had previously, here the Allies have a slight advantage. They have a +1 with their die roll, and the Germans, the Central Powers, have a -1 for their combat value. So the inactive side, the French, are going to go ahead and roll theirs. So they're looking at the +1, rolling 2 dice. They received, ouch, a 6. And a 6 is a DX. So if we look at the DX, it is the same as AX, except the side that didn't roll the dice chooses whether to destroy their own front fighter or front bomber. Interesting. Interesting. I'm looking at the results and I'm trying to figure out, does that, does that mean that's good? Did we want to get that? So the side that the dice roller chooses anyone opposing bomber. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, except the side that didn't roll the dice chooses whether to destroy their own front fighter or front bomber. Man, that's tough. The Germans are going to choose. Yeah. They're going to choose to have this unit be destroyed, which is a shame to have lost a fighter. Now, the nice thing is, if I look on the chart, that is a green result, a green DX, which means the pilot survives. So if I were playing a whole full game, I would make sure to note that, when this gets destroyed, I'm going to go, to my pilot track, and I'm going to increase the pilot available by 1 to show that, the pilot survived. He can be put in another plane if I build one, but this unit is destroyed, so I'll throw it over here as destroyed, which is a damn shame, really. That really sucks for the Germans, but at least they got to choose. Had the French chosen with a AX result, they might have selected the bomber to be destroyed and thus remove the ability for any sort of spotting or bombing, for that matter. So now the Germans are going to roll. They're going to roll with their original value, which is -1. They got a 12. A 12 on a -1 is an AC result. So the dice roller chooses any one opposing bomber to clear through to the target. It need not be the front bomber. If there are no enemy bombers, ignore the result. So the Germans actually got a no result, which is unfortunate. Now we get to the choice of does the active side want to abort, or we've got to decide. Do the Germans want to flee and to say, this is getting too hairy? If they did that, both the bomber and the fighter would return to base and flip, and that would be that, and they would be, everything would be over. But I think we want to try. So the active side says they're going to keep going. The inactive side, the French could retreat, but they're good to go. They think they're ready to keep going. So we're going to just start another round. So again, now we compare again the values, and now this time the Allies have a +2, and the Germans have a -2. So the French are going to get their die roll. They roll a 3 on the +2, and that is an AX. That is an AX. So the dice roller chooses whether to destroy the opposing front bomber or the front fighter. Well, they're going to go ahead and destroy that bomber. The pilot survives, so again we would up the pilot count for the Germans by 1. And yeah, they destroyed the front bomber. They just get out of here, Germans. No bombing for you. The Germans get their die roll. They get a 6, which is a DA. DA as a something. Okay. So this is an abort, but it doesn't really matter as now this is all well and over. Now there would be an advantage for the Germans in the next round because it's only going to be 1v1 since this French unit is being aborted. But the bombers are already taken care of. There's no bombers left, so it's really a question of do they want to keep going? I think the Germans would want to keep going because now they have the advantage, and maybe they'd be able to destroy that French plane. But so if we were looking at the active side can voluntarily abort, they'd say we want to keep going. But the French have accomplished their mission, which is stopping the bomber. So I think the French would say they're going to voluntarily abort air-to-air combat. So they're just going to go ahead and all abort. So these units would go back. They can return to base with their full movement value. So, just for the sake of it, I'm just going to throw them back here. The German unit is going to return to base themselves, and unfortunately, they just don't have very many places to go elsewise. And with these units gone, which I'll just delete them since they've been destroyed. We're not done with ground striking, but what we are done with is the air portion of the ground strike. So the surviving bombers didn't make it to target, and so now the effectiveness of the artillery unit here is heavily reduced. So now there's only, if we're going to look at this, its values are cut in half, which is a damn shame. So now it's 5 cut in half is 2.5 rounded up to 3. So we're rolling for the first corps there. Failure, second, failure, and now this artillery gets full value against the artillery division here for 5, and it succeeded. So we'll flip. Let me try to get these guys all back in the right alignment here. And so for all of that awesomeness, and now we flip the artillery unit, all of those attempts kind of didn't really go the way we wanted it to. This one down here fizzled, and down here the French Air Force managed to shoot down German planes enough that a spotter could not be used to properly aim the artillery in the right locations and provide enemy positions, and so the artillery had reduced effectiveness and didn't do nearly as much damage as it maybe could have otherwise. So there you go. And now we've got this one over here, And this one might be a little bit more in the Germans' favor. So they have their fighter and their bomber. They've got their fighter here. Again, I'll just rotate to note where we're at. So here, the advantage is to the Germans by quite a bit. They've got a +3, and the French have a -3. French roll their die, and they get a 12 on the -3 is a DC result. So let's take a look at the DC result. Okay, so the folks who didn't roll the dice, so the Germans, get to decide which of their own bombers to clear through. Well, obviously they're going to clear this guy through. So that sucks for the Allies, and then the Germans are going to get their roll. They get a 10 on the +3, which is an AC. So they'd get to choose an enemy bomber to clear through where there are no bombers. So that's basically a no result, but that turned out fine. Now they can decide if they're going to voluntarily abort. The Germans have a great advantage here, so they're not going to abort. But the French are going to say that things have gotten a little too hairy, and I just eliminated that unit on accident. Oh well. For the purposes of this video, it doesn't matter. I think I put it in the scrap to pull by accident. Yeah, there it is. It is going to, with the range at 2, it's going to go back here. It doesn't want to fight. And then these guys, they'll just fly back here. No big deal. So now that we've performed that, this is our cleared bomber. Now we could have the bomber be a bomber and conduct bombing and rolling against a really low number, but instead what we'll do is we'll have this guy be a spotter. So he has performed a spot, meaning that I gotta fix this here. There we go. That means that our attacking artillery here with the 5 will use their full value against all the units here, regardless of the entrenchments. So we'll go ahead and roll for the first corps in that stack, the bottom, and that's a success. I wonder if, yeah, it retains its, okay, interesting. I probably need to do something there with showing that it's still technically entrenched. I don't think the entrenchment goes away when they're flipped, but we'll roll for the second unit, failure, and then the division was a success. So out of that, we managed to flip one of the entrenched units, and we managed to flip the armor division, which is going to hamper the Allies' ability to attack us with armor divisions, at least from that stack, which that's pretty good. I do want to check the rules very quickly for entrenchments to see if they're lost for being flipped. My assumption is that they are not. If an entrenched unit leaves its hex, the entrenchment is destroyed. Okay, so I think they're still entrenched. It's just that when you're flipped, you're basically nullifying the bonus from being entrenched. So we'll know that he's still entrenched if we were to flip him back. But the way Vassal has the front and back of a counter, we don't see it rotated. This is something to keep in mind when you're playing Vassal. But based on my reading of the rules here, it would mean that even an entrenched unit flipped by ground striking is still entrenched. So there you go. Okay, so that has gotten a little bit fixed up, and then we did return to bases with everybody. This unit We'll return to base. Let's see, 4 away. 1, 2, 3. Let's throw them back here, because why not? And then these units over here that we had fly cap are going to flip, and they're going to have to go back somewhere. We'll just do this to get them out of the way. I don't think it really matters. Okay. Well, the ground strikes are done. Let me check where we're at for time. We're at 40 minutes. So the ground striking is complete. And you could see, you know, having multiple fighters allocated to combat maybe doesn't make a huge difference. You might not think. But if you've got a weaker fighter that can't compare with an enemy fighter, if you can get more fighters to the combat, you can even the odds for that quite a bit. So now that we're done with ground striking, now we would, let's see, if this was a normal turn, we'd do rail movement. I don't think there's any need for rail movement. I don't think we have any need to do land movement, regular land movement, I should say. No invasion. Okay, so now we would get to our land combats. And this is going to be another one of those cases where we have to decide a great number of things, right? Now, for the sake of simplicity in this video, I'm not going to be using offensive points because that's just going to make things more complicated than I think they need to be. You've already seen maybe in other videos how to use offensive points. So I think for this, we're going to just declare our attacks. So, let's see. So there's going to be an attack here. So I'm going to rotate all these guys to show. So there's going to be an attack at this hex by everybody who can. There's going to be an attack. Well, let's see. That's 11. I'm actually going to have, it's going to be these 3 units attacking here, these 3 stacks attacking here, especially because we managed to do a little bit of flipping, and we're going to do an attack here with these 2 stacks, I think. Okay, so if we follow the land combat procedure, which is 11.12, we declared all attacks. Defender announces notional units. Okay, there aren't going to be any of that. There's going to be no... boy, if we had some ships out here, there might be defensive shore bombardment, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to skip that. Add defensive shore bombardment. We'll just skip that, because that's pretty straightforward if you look at the rules for that. Offensive HQ support. Let's see, where are all of our HQs at? Yeah, they're kind of far away right now. Yeah. I don't think we're going to actually announce any offensive or defensive support, largely because a lot of these HQs are too far away. This actually, he might be able to help. Might be able to help. Yeah, if you're attacking to get HQ support, it's got to be one of the attacking units. I don't have any attacking HQ units. but we do have a HQ that is adjacent. We have Falk, who is adjacent to this hex, and that's really it. Okay, well then what we'll do is we'll have Falk. He's going to flip. This would be only after advancing, after combat, but I'll just do it now. So he's going to provide a -2 die roll to here. And I'll just real quickly here to support that. I'm going to make a label. Okay. And now we have ground support. Well, if you've been following along with the ground striking, ground support is going to be very similar. So ground support permits you to support a land attack with bombers and recon aircraft and fire artillery into adjacent hexes. Both sides may provide ground support into the same combat. So this is where, in my previous videos when we played through a turn, I would say, you know, am I using a balloon for observation? It was always automatically succeeding in earlier turns because we didn't have fighters that could stop that balloon from getting there. Now we have to do it a little more carefully. So we're gonna provide ground support and have the opponent fly combat air patrol to potential target hexes. Well, this is a little bit easier than ground striking because we know where the attacks are going to be. So let's see. Here. Oh boy, we're kind of limited, aren't we? Yeah. Well, we can provide defensive ground support. So let's try that. So we're gonna. Oh wait, that's cap. Okay. Well, this plane's gonna go here for cap, and this plane is gonna fly here for cap, and so will this guy for cap. All within range, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Cap. We don't have very many fighters out here. Okay. Okay, so we flew cap. And now we're going to designate as the Germans artillery and have our escorting bombers and fighters and combat air patrol to potential target hexes. So, if we're going to go here, we'll have this bomber go, being escorted by this fighter. And then we'll have this bomber go with this fighter escort. And then over here, oh boy, we're low on units to use, aren't we? Okay. No, this is going to work out okay. This will be a good example. So, okay, so that's all that we're going to do for flying our units to do bombing runs. Now, our opponent's going to designate artillery and fly intercepting fighters or bombers with us escorting fighters to the target hexes. And so they're going to add this bomber to the mix. And they're also going to send this bomber to the mix, as well as this bomber to the mix. And let's see. The French are going to fly both of these bombers into the mix. with a balloon. And, oh, I'm sorry, the Germans should have sent a balloon in here. We'll just throw that on there into the, into the big frickin' stack. And let's see. Yeah, they'd just be suicided if they went in there. So they're going to hold these guys back. So now that the Allies have flown their bombers and escorting fighters to the target hexes, now the Germans yet again get to intercept. And really the only place that we really have even any more units to do that with is going to be over here. So with this very powerful set of Commonwealth units hoping to stop the attack here, they're going to commit their fighters to intercept, and they are within intercept range with rounding, to get here. So we're going to have a number of big air-to-air combats here. So we're going to go, again, from top to bottom. So German fighter, German bomber, against, okay, I guess that's nothing. So, yeah. Since the French didn't want to put any of their other units in danger here, then the units are just going to get to add the support here. So, because of this, we're going to add artillery and aircraft, tactical factors, and reconnaissance modifiers of surviving bombers to their side's combat value in the land attack. So we could add 1 combat value to the attacking combat value here, which right now it looks like it's 9 and 19, 28. So it could be 29 against 11, from 28 to 11, 29 to 11, which isn't really that big of a difference. Or we have this unit provide observation bonus, which I think that's what we're going to do. So I'm just going to label this, since I've got a lot going on here, observation. So he gets the observation bonus, and then because of that, we're going to have remaining aircraft return to base, and they're just going to fly over here, get them out of the way. Ordinarily, you'd probably move this unit back as well, but because I want to remember that they get the observation bonus, I'm just going to leave it here. It doesn't really make a difference right now anyway. Now here, this gets a little squirrely here, so let me get some room to work with. So we've got what's going to be a German bomber, French bomber, French bomber, French bomber, and German fighter, German bomber, French fighter. Okay. All right, well, so this is going to be kind of an interesting lineup here. Right away, there's a lot of bombers, but relatively few fighters. So again, we look at the comparison of numbers. It's going to be minus or +1 for the Allies, -1 for the Germans. So die roll for the Allies is a 9 on +1, which is a no result. Interesting. Okay. Well, that's good for the Germans. So they're going to roll on their -1. And they got a 6, which is an AA result. And the dice roller chooses whether to abort the opposing front bomber or front fighter. Turn aborted aircraft face down. Okay, so what do the Germans want to get rid of? Probably the front fighter, right? I mean, that's better. So the Germans are going to say, okay, well, I'm going to abort the front fighter. So they are gone. They're gonna be returning to base, which I'm just gonna do now since it doesn't really matter. So they're just gonna go back. Ordinarily, you'd probably wait till everything was finished up, and so now we're going to look at the active side can voluntarily abort. Well, I think they're in pretty good shape. And unfortunately, the French put their balloon first, which might have been okay if there was enough fighter support, but now there isn't. So they could abort everybody, which would save these units. Or they could fight, and it would be probably a disaster. Because the differential would be 5, and yeah, probably not very good. So I think, yeah, okay. I think these guys are just going to abort and return to base. So we'll just, again, I'm just throwing them out of here because for the purposes of this, 1, 2. It's not like they've got very many places to go. So they abort, and because they've aborted, these units are now cleared for the hex. So this unit is going to be providing observation, and change this to the tactical bombing. Yep. So these made it through, and then obviously our fighter here is going to flip and is going to return to base. We'll just throw him there. Now you'll notice here that I'm having to be very methodical in running through this procedure because if you actually look at land combats, you're supposed to fly and resolve ground support missions before the land combats are resolved one by one. So we are having to do this in a slow, methodical way. And then finally we have here, so this is going to be kind of an interesting combat that is going to take place. So we'll, come on, there we go. So German fighter, we'll put this German fighter in front, which is better. Commonwealth bomber, Commonwealth bomber. So the net effect of this is that the bombers that are going to be coming through here are going to be providing defensive ground support to the Allies here, and the Germans don't have any support. They're merely going to try to keep the Commonwealth from having their own support. So we look at the combat values. So 8 plus 1 is 9, 7 plus 1 is 8, so the Germans have an advantage. The Allies are going to roll on the -1 chart. They got a 7, which is a DA, which is not terribly good for them. So DA as AA, except that side that didn't roll the dice is going to birth their own front fighter or front bomber. Oh, actually, yeah. So that was actually a pretty good roll. Yeah, they rolled a 7, -1 AA. The dice roller chooses whether to abort the opposing front bomber or front fighter. Oh no, they got a DA, I'm sorry. A DA. Well, they can't abort their own fighter, so they're going to have to abort their front fighter. Yeah, okay. German die roll is an 11 on +1. And that's a DC. So we get to clear one of our bombers, which we don't have one. But we can turn this into a bounce combat. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. The Germans are going to do a bounce combat. The defender selects any one of the remaining fighters and any one opposing aircraft that remains in the combat. And then they fight an air-to-air combat. Well, so what we're going to do is we're going to have this Albatross target this guy right here for a single round. And the rating of the bouncing fighter gains yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're going to have him target this unit here, so they get a +1, the Albatross does, so it's a 7 to 3 in terms of air-to-air combat ratings. Okay. So it's -4. So die roll for -4 for the allies is 7. So a 7 on a -4 is no result. And then the +4 for the German roll, 16 on +4 is a DX. Well, and because this is a one-on-one, that means that this unit, the defender would get to choose whether to destroy their own front bomber or front fighter, but because this one-on-one combat, it's the only selectable unit. This unit is actually destroyed. So we'll go ahead and just eliminate it. And again, the Commonwealth would get a pilot. Actually, let me double check that. DX. Okay, pilot shot down. Pilot survives if shot down over friendly territory, and this is friendly territory, so they do get their pilot back. So you got to watch out for the color of the results on here. So green, pilot survives. Yellow, only survives over friendly territory. Otherwise, its pilot dies. Okay, and now that that's accomplished, this fighter goes back to its original place in the order as the front. And we're going to resume our air-to-air sequence. Which would have left us with the active side can voluntarily abort. Well, this fighter could keep trying to go, but I think they'd get defeated, so we're going to abort. So these guys are both aborting. We'll just throw them over here. And these fighters are done. So we'll send them back here. And each of these, so we'll have this guy do, I like to call it anti-observation for the attacker, and then support in this hex. I guess we'll call it tactical bombing. Eesh. Okay. All right. So we had some air combats that went okay. We had some air combats that didn't go very well for the Germans. And now we're actually going to get back to, in terms of the land combat, the actual resolution of the land combat. So again, if you were to go all the way back to the land combat rolls, you can see that once you're done doing your ground support missions, then you're going to actually resolve the land combats. Probably that's going to be helpful as we go through this and calculating all of the modifiers that could come up, is to look at the 2d10 combat results table as we go here, because there's going to be a couple of things we'll want to make note of that are on that chart. I know this video is getting long, but I want to make sure to get through the rest of this here. So, first things first, these 3 hexes attacking this hex. So first what we're going to do is we're going to figure out what the combat table is going to be. Defender chooses table if the terrain chart says so. Well, for flat, it could be the attacker's choice. So if the attacker has more armor than the defender, they would get to pick. Well, we don't have any armor involved in this combat. But we do have a mechanized unit, this Stoßtruppen division. So if the attacker has more mech than the defender, and the defender has no arm or anti-tank, which they do not, then the attacker gets to select the combat table. In all the other videos that I've done, we've always, by default, used the assault table, because that's usually just the best for the defender, and in all cases that, if it's flat terrain, plain terrain like this, like our target hexes, and there's no armor or mechanized units, then the defender's going to get to pick, and they're going to want that assault table. As the attacker, we are going to use the blitz table. So that is the net effect of having this Stoßtruppen division in place as we get to, because of the lineup, we get to pick that combat table. That combat table is going to be a little bit better for the attacker in terms of getting yellow and green results, and it's also going to cause more retreats to occur as a result of combat, and sooner too. So we can push units. We may not destroy them, but we push them out of the way, allowing our units to advance. So we'll do that. So we've selected that. Now let's look at our ratios here. So we have 9 and 10, so 19 plus that other 9 is 28. So I'm going to take note of this here, 28 to, what was in here, 11 as a base. And then let's take a look at our bonuses. So the observation means that we aren't going to get a minus. So that's resolved. So no minus for observation. We'll just send him back here. We didn't have any ground support, so our 28 to 11 is going to come out to be, let's see, that's not quite 3-to-1 odds. That's at least 2-to-1 odds. So we'll say +4. I'm not going to use fractionals right now because we've got enough to worry about. So it's a little over twice the odds, so that gives a +4 base. We don't have a minus because of the observation. Next, what we're going to decide to do is if we're going to... we do get a +1 per attacking armor or mech unit if attacking a clear desert hex in fine weather, and a blitz is called. So we do get the +1 for the Stoßtruppen there. So we're up to +5. Then we're going to... we are going to use a gas attack. So because we have a gas unit here, we're going to make a declaration if we're going to do a gas attack. If this is the first time a gas attack is being performed, we would potentially be drawing an entry pool for the U.S. because the Central Powers are using gas first. Since I'm not doing that, there's no point in drawing because I don't have any of that set up, but keep that in mind. Once an effect has, you do the die roll. If you look at the U.S. entry, it's a percentage chance that an entry chit is going to be pulled or taken out. The first time it actually affects the U.S.'s counter mix of entry pool markers, you don't need to roll anymore after that. So it could be, the Germans use gas attacks and the U.S. doesn't react, and then maybe the French do a gas attack in return, and that time it causes entry to be impacted and make the U.S. enter later. Now no more, both sides are free to gas attack without any die rolls for U.S. entry. So keep that in mind. So the gas attack, we're going to roll a die, and it's a 7, which means we get a +2 to the die roll, and that's again on the 2d10 combat results table. So now we're up to +7 for that. Very good. And I think that is all the base modifiers without taking into account the entrenchment. Let me get these guys like so. But because we have entrenched units, that's going to take away bonuses. So again, if you were to look at the rules for entrenchments, that's 20, rule section, I believe, 22.6 or 21.6. So it's going to be a -1 to each defending corps that is entrenched gives a -1 to attack. So because we have 2 entrenched corps here, that takes away the bonus of our gas back down to a +5. So now we're going to go ahead and roll the die, I think. There's nothing else that's going to impact combat here. So 2d10 +5 on the blitz chart. Ooh, only an 8. So let's compare. 8 + 5 is going to be 13. So if you look at the 2 different charts, had this been an assault combat, there would have been no result. But because we have, we're rolling on the blitz, it's a little bit better, sort of, in that we do lose a 0.5, and the defenders lose 1. And unfortunately, when you use the blitz table, the attacker's first loss must be a motorized mech or armored unit. So our stormtroopers are gone here, and the French have to lose a unit, so they'll just remove a corps. But because the defenders oh no, I'm sorry. I think I got that wrong. The it's expressed attacker defender. So really, we lost a whole unit. So we had to lose 0.5 for. Oh boy, I just screwed it up. Well, I'll just grab another infantry and we'll fix the problem here. Correction. The French are going to lose 1 unit, a 0.5 loss, which they'll take with the artillery, I guess. And the Germans had to lose a whole 1 unit, and that first loss must be a motorized mech or arm unit. So they lost the division, and they still have a 0.5 loss to take. And so we'll end up breaking down. The Germans will break down a this unit and put in a infantry division. Now the problem with the division is going to come in face down, and it's not going to be able to entrench. This unit is also flipped because of the results on the table. And so even with the blitz, even with the gas attack, we didn't roll very well. And basically, you know, this part of the front isn't going to move anywhere. Let's take a look at this next one. So and I'll just get these guys back in proper rotation here. Okay. So if we look, we've got, let's see, that's going to be 14. And 24 and 37. 37 to, let's see, it's 3, so 11 to 11 again. So that is 3 to 1 odds, so that's plus 6. The observation allows us to avoid a negative. We'll just throw them back here. The tactical bombing means we get to add the tactical factor to the combat, which, you know, in World War II, in the World in Flames game for World War II, that will tend to be a little more useful because the tactical factors are higher. In this one, in Fatal Alliances, the tactical factors tend to be pretty low, and so you're not typically going to see, yeah, you're typically not going to see this be super duper useful. Yeah. Might not have been very smart to do this. Because it's not really worth it. The one just isn't worth very much. Um, yeah. Okay, so that would have made it a 38 to 11, which still is, if we don't use the fractional odds, would be, yeah, 38 to 11, and it's still a plus 6. That's still 3 to 1 odds. Not quite 4 to 1 odds, so that's all we get. If you're playing with fractional odds as an optional rule, then doing this might be a little more valuable, but typically it's not going to be with these units with such low tactical numbers. Okay. Then if we look at, let's see, the rest of our combat, so let's see, what do we get? We've got -2 for Fox supporting, so that's a +4. We do have an engineer attacking, so that's a +1. And then we've got -2 for the entrenchment, so this is only a +3 on the assault table, which, yeah, you know, is going to be a pretty bad deal. But we'll roll it. So we got a 14, so 2.5. Yikes. Okay, well, here's 1, 2. Well, there's 0.51, and then we'll lose another one here. Not too good. Not too good. And then let's see, the French have to lose 1, and so they'll get rid of that guy. I should also point out that all of these units over here have to be flipped, except for the fort, due to the combat results, so not so good for the Germans. And yeah, all these guys have to be flipped. Again, they keep their entrenchment, but they are flipped. Not so great. And then finally, up here we have this particular combat. This is, let's see, 13 plus 13, so 26 to... Oh wow, that's a strong artillery unit. 14. Yikes. And that's not quite 2-to-1 odds, so be at best 3-to-2 odds. So that's a +3. But unfortunately, yeah, this is going to be a disaster. That's a total disaster. That would be... Yeah, that's not good. That is not good. They're unobserved and they have an anti-observer. So, wow. So that becomes a +1. Oh, and the ground support, actually, I need to modify that. So it would have been 26 to 16. Which, depending on how you look at it, I mean, that's arguably 1-to-1 odds, maybe. It gets kind of hairy because you got to look at it. Let's see, it'd be 26 divided by 16, 1.6. Yeah, 1.5 times. Yeah, okay. So it really wouldn't have changed it very much. Okay, so these things are done. We'll just flip and have them go home. We'll say they were here. Okay. So we've got a +1 from all of that. We do have the blitz because we have more mech than they have armor or anti-tanks. We get the blitz. We get the +1 for the blitzing unit, so +2. And I think that's it, which is just not very good. Just not very good at all. Okay. So the +2 on the blitz chart. So we get a 12. A 12 is a no result. So, yeah. Did not get to where they wanted to be. Okay, so the attacking units will flip. And the Germans are basically done attacking. Now, let's see. That's it for the Germans. So we could call the video here. We're at 123, but I just wanted to show very quickly what would happen now. You know, we had a series of attacks with air that kind of didn't go anywhere or went, you know, pretty weakly, and could have been a lot better. In fact, I forgot that I should have had this artillery flip for ground striking and thus could not have helped other attacks. Or I guess it didn't anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Okay. So now with this situation, you know, what happens when the French attack back, right? So let's put ourselves in that place for attacking. With all these German air forces flipped, we don't really need to do any air combats anymore. We just need to do, you know, what if we were aiding in air combat, right? So if the Allies just straight went into attacking, I mean, like, let's look here. French 9 and 9, 18. 18 to 9 is plus 2, so that's plus 4. Let's see. There's probably, even if you were to add 2 to that, it still wouldn't change things. So this unit would be an observer, and then you'd have the gas unit die roll. So they roll a 7, so that's a plus 2, so that's a plus 6. So then, yeah, so with observation, a plus 6, we do the die roll on the assault table because that's all they could hope for. And we get a 19. 19 is a 1.1 to 1.5, so the French would maybe lose a unit, and the Germans would have to lose a unit and a half, and so they'd probably lose that and lose that. And half would get to not flip, so I guess I'd flip this guy, and I'd flip that guy. Okay, where else would they go? They'd probably want to make use of their armor, of which they've now have limited capacity. But let's say, I just want to show, so remember for a second that these anti-tank units are flipped. Because we have the anti-tank units here, the Allies may not be able to actually use the blitz table. So if the French wanted to attack here, that anti-tank mobilized artillery counts as 2 armed divisions for this purpose. So if the French were to try to make an attack here, even with, well, they only have the 1 armored division, so they would not be able to use the blitz table. If this artillery division was unflipped, that's 2 armored divisions. The Germans would still get to make sure that the assault table is used because this anti-tank is used for double value when deciding whether or not the attacker is going to choose the table. If we were to look at same thing over here, it's 1 anti-tank division, but it counts as 2, and thus nullifies the advantage of these 2 armor divisions in terms of getting to choose the blitz table here. If I'm looking elsewhere, I guess they don't really have an avenue to attack. Let's pretend for a second that this unit's not here, and instead it's like so. And these stacks of units could all attack here. I just want to do this again for demonstration purposes. So we have 14 plus 13, so 27 plus, and again for this example, let's pretend, well, no, we'll leave this as is. So we'll have this cavalry unit also attack for 3 more, so 30 against 17. And just with the rounding and the fun, all of that is, we'll say that it's not quite, yeah, it's like 3.3 to 2 odds. So that's a plus 3 from odds. And actually, come to think of it, I think we probably... Yeah, it's going to be 27 to 17 because we don't want the coordination negative. We're just going to be attacking with Commonwealth units because if the French were involved, there'd be a -1. So, yeah, blah, 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 +3 base. Then, because we have the choice, we have more armor than the defender has here, as well as more, they don't have any anti-tank, so we get to choose the blitz table. We're going to get +1 for the blitzing armor, so that's +4. We'll have this unit over here flip for avoiding the observation, so he ran observation. And then, again, I don't think ground support, if you were to add 2, it'd be 29 to 17. That doesn't really shift the odds anymore. So +4, but then, let's see, were these guys entrenched? They were. There's 2 entrenched corps there, so that means it's only a +2. Is there any other bonus we can get here? Doesn't look like it. Does not look like it. There's no gas attacks here. That would be very useful. One other thing is if we were attacking here, this anti-tank would also provide a -1 of the die roll. So these are really, these anti-tank units were well positioned here in my setup to block the effectiveness of these armored divisions very, very well. And so if we really get down to it, I don't think we're going to get more than a +2 here. Yeah, I think that's it. So +2 on the blitz table. And we got a 13, which is attacker loses 1 and the opponent loses 0.5. So we lose an art. And the Commonwealth is going to have to get rid of something. They're going to get rid of this guy, and now... Oh, actually, they should have had bonuses for flipped units. Dang it. And that actually would have been a +5. So that would have been actually an 18 result. Okay. Okay. I screwed up, guys. I'm sorry. We'll fix it. So, yeah, sure. We'll just make this unit in its place, the one that we got rid of. Even if the numbers weren't quite right. And the Germans had that arty. Good enough. So we had the arty here. So in actuality, because there were two disrupted core, that would have added a +4 back, even after the entrenching. So +4 for that, +1 for the disrupted division. That's a net +5. So really would have been a result of 18. And 18, and this is finally, I'm glad for the purposes of this example video, we could see this. An 18 on the blitz table is a no losses for the attacker R result. An R result. And it's yellow. So half the attackers don't have to flip. So we'll say, well, we might be able to advance after combat. So let's just take this step by step. Yeah, this is interesting. Okay, so the defenders don't actually lose anything, but they do have an R. So the attacker retreats all surviving defending land units 1 hex, even if they're face down. You retreat units individually, and you can retreat them into different hexes. You can't retreat a unit into a hex it couldn't move into. If a unit could retreat into several hexes, you must retreat it according to these priorities. hex not containing an opponent Zoc and not causing overstacking. Oh, that's going to be a little tough here. So we'll have this unit retreat back here. So he could go there. This guy could go here, but only because there are friendly units there and it wouldn't cause overstacking. And this guy, he can't retreat anywhere because it's going to violate stacking limits, and anywhere else are enemy units. So this unit is actually destroyed because it can't retreat, which, you know, in terms of morale would be terrible. So they lose that. And now, if the combat leaves the target hex empty, which it did because of the retreat, we can advance units. And so what we'll do is, because these motorized units can all advance without flipping, everyone will advance. They do lose their entrenchment, so they become... we're going to go ahead and rotate them back all the way. So they advance without flipping. And now we need to flip half the units face down. So that would mean out of the 6 that attacked, we need to flip 3 of them. And let's see, we'll go ahead and flip this guy, and we'll flip... I don't like losing the artillery for flipping, but it might be more advantageous to have the armor unflipped. So I think we'll just do that. So these guys are all flipped, these guys all advance, and now we've managed to take a hex back from the Central Powers, and now we might be able to continue moving up and over in future attacks to cut off the Germans here and push them back. So you can see, I mean, they haven't been great die rolls, and the modifiers, after all said and done, are pretty low for modifiers. But that roll on the blitz table makes a pretty huge difference. I mean, you have to have a result of 20 before you can really expect to be eliminating enemy units consistently and shattering them out of the hex, whereas you really only need a 16 result on the blitz table to get a retreat and thus be able to take hexes from them. And the whole reason at the end of the day that you want to be taking hexes, especially towards the late game, is that while destroying units hits morale, I'm going to hide, taking territory back means you can get cities and resources back that might have been causing morale losses, or will in turn cause morale losses for the opponent. And really, it's morale losses that are consistent across turns that will hurt them more than just spikes in morale, because, you know, if you're getting, you know, -3 per turn for resources and cities lost, I mean, that's stuff that is harder to make up. Rather than maybe one turn you lose 10 for units, but the next turn you don't lose any because it's winter. Those 3 morale points lost, you know, those 3 points worth of morale lost for territory taken hits every turn. And so that's where, you know, the Allies can use their armor to push the Germans back out maybe of France, and if they're lucky enough, even take some territory that could cause the Germans' morale to drop, as opposed to, say, the same way with these mechanized units, that the Germans could use them to push further into France and take Paris or other cities that are going to impact the morale status of the Allies, or, you know, France in particular, since they're the easiest to hit and take land from. So I hope that was kind of well in demonstrating what these other advanced units do. Um, I think this is ultimately going to be my final video for Fatal Alliances, unless I do maybe one more overall review video or something. Um, but I've done so many videos for this game, you obviously know what I think of it. I like it enough to spend so much time on it that, you know, I have 20 hours or more, probably 30 hours of videos here covering and teaching this game. The overall takeaway is, as the game develops, aircraft become a more involved part of the gameplay and will sort of slow down gameplay as you fight air combats. At the end of the day, because the tactical values are all pretty low, it is going to mean that your bombers are going to be more acting in the role of observers and spotters and maybe ground strikers, but ground support really isn't going to be, super valuable unless it would provide just enough to give you another combat odds shift or something, that bare minimum needed to reach 3-to-1 odds or 4-to-1 odds. So you'll want to keep an eye out to where you think you can get it. But again, you might, commit airplanes to a combat that you might lose, and then you won't get the ground support factors added, and you don't get the combat odds shift, and you don't get the ground striking and all of that. So it is that extra layer to the combat of your offensives, is that air combat, and can your planes get to where you want them to be to perform the action that you want. Obviously, the mechanized units and the armored units that get you access to that blitz table can be a huge help and can be a pretty big difference in shifting things to a degree that you can actually succeed in combats, even with entrenched units, as entrenched units become a thing on the battlefield. I had a very extreme example where all units on the front were entrenched. You might have cases where that's not entirely true. Maybe there's only one unit entrenched, or none entrenched because of movement. But, if you combine some ground striking to flip units with blitz, and those units happen to not be entrenched, then you're talking really significant bonuses. What we would normally look at as a decent bonus to roll with, like a +7, on the blitz. I mean, even that 11, that's not great, but, 8 plus 7, well, now that's a 15, and 17, and now you're starting to retreat units. So that odds of being able to make ground much, much better with those blitzing units, much better in that regard. So definitely worth the time and build factors, or build points, to build these units later in the game to try to make that great breakthrough in the fronts where you're clogged up. And then obviously as well, the gas units are great. I mean, if you can get a +3, that's a very significant bonus, and it's only a 20% chance that you could get that. I mean, you could still get a 20% chance of a negative, but it's a worthwhile attempt, or worthwhile risk to take for that. So okay, well, this is a pretty long video, hour and 44 minutes. Didn't really want it to be this long, but we got through a number of good aircraft combat examples and some offensives that were done, some attacks. Obviously, when you get to things like using offensive points combined with all of this, you're going to get some much better results. The fact that I didn't use any offensive points to double combat strength meant that there's not as many bonuses available, but we probably would have seen the bonuses reach somewhere in the +6 to +7 scale, and that might have dramatically impacted where some of these combats went. But okay, I think that's where we're going to leave it here. This was the end of the Advanced Combat series. I don't think there's anything else I can really show that's going to make a huge difference in what you're going to see in the game. If you've watched every video up to this point, you've basically seen, most of the possibilities of mechanics, and so now it's just up to you to play the game, implement the strategies, play with the mechanics, and fight World War One. So yeah, come a long way since I started making these videos a while ago. So thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this, though, for other games, hit subscribe and hit the like button. All that can help. Obviously, I want to get these videos out to other folks as well to enjoy, and get some maybe get some other games to the table. So if there's any games you'd like to see, let me know in the comments below. Yeah, that should just about do it. So thanks for watching, and take care.